We're going to bring up our next panel. It's actually a fireside discussion with two of my favorite people on the planet. One, Betty Hung. Betty and I have been working together since '97. We were both 12 years old at the time. She's a partner at Vista Equity Partners and one of our operating principals, and I think she has 11 portfolio companies today. And frankly, I think about Betty as the MVP of our operating partner group. So she does a spectacular job in keeping all of our CEOs on task, online, and making transformational changes in each one of our businesses. Monica Enand, come on up, y'all. Is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Zapproved, one of our portfolio companies in the Endeavor Fund. And Monica, you may want to, again, talk a little bit about your experience in starting a business in software and in tech, and her business really focuses on the litigation space. So, again, thank you all for both being here, and good luck and have fun.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, now we're live. Woo. Okay.
All right.
It's like a talk show with a microphone. Thank you, Robert. Thank you guys all for coming. We hope this is going to be a really interesting chat. It's a little bit different than the other CEOs that we just heard from. Monica's a founder, which is really, really unique. So, Monica, let's start with a little bit around leadership in a technology company. So, I think as all these women in this room, I think, also are dealing with, you rose up in a male-dominated industry, obviously, and we'd like to hear a little bit more about your journey, beginning with the fact that you actually were already on a very successful career path, not unlike Lisa, at a couple of really big companies. You were at Intel, you were at IBM, and then you decided to break away from that and actually found your own company. And so can you tell us a little bit about that decision and what it was like in the early days to be you?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Robert for everything he does all the time at Vista. That really is a beacon to I think, everyone in our industry. Yeah, first of all, I think leadership, we all know the data shows that leadership is harder for women than it is for men, and that we can say the exact same things, and that it is a harder trick. So it's something that I think we all have to be conscious of all the time. That there is it's not is there bias in the world, is what is the bias in the world. We're all of us are neurologically designed to have this bias, right? So when you think about kind of that leadership journey, for me, I started at Intel. I went to school for computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon University, which was very, very, very male when I went. I was one of less than a handful of women in the class and one of very few to actually graduate with that degree. And went from there to Intel and worked on a microprocessor project and worked in software there and led a big software team. Extremely, again, one of a handful of women and a very large team. I loved my job. First of all, it was an exciting place to be. We were working on hard problems with smart people every day, and I loved what I was doing. And there were I was happy to hear everyone talk about the women, the senior women that they found, and they were able to get mentors. I didn't find any of those in my early career, but I found that the men in those senior positions were very willing to be mentors and sponsors. And so you could reach out to them as well, as long as you developed that sort of personal relationship, were receptive to feedback, demonstrated that you were able to take feedback and be coachable. You could definitely get that virtuous cycle of that kind of mentorship going. But then I went to IBM, and I kind of always had this itch. I had known some entrepreneurs. My brother was an entrepreneur. And even though I loved being at these big companies and being around these smart, ambitious projects, I always thought, wonder if I could do it myself. But I always had my doubts. And I now know that that's called imposter syndrome. At the time, I didn't. I just had it. And I went to a startup, and actually a male colleague who was at Carnegie Mellon, was at Intel, I had known for a long time, was leading that team. And I realized all male founders, all male executive team that I joined, and I realized they didn't know everything. And I don't know why I thought they did. That journey of being on their team and realizing they were kind of making it up as they went along. And I didn't know why. Like one day I literally got out of the shower and I remember standing in the bathroom with my hair in a towel and thinking, why not me? Like, why do they think it's okay to make it up as they go along and I don't? And I've been so scared for so long. So I think there's these like flip moments where you kind of go, all right, I'm going to take a leap. But it was a hard journey. It was not all rosy. I will tell you.
So you actually went to school at a very tough engineering program, and you actually worked in software, and then you decided actually to diverge your path, sort of like Robert, and go into business, right? So what can we do in our industry to make that path more attractive for young women who maybe don't want to study or don't want to practice computer science, but we want them to join the tech industry?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, every company is going to be a tech company. That is just the world we live in today. So you're not going to avoid it. And by the way, it needs people from all different backgrounds. We talk about diversity in terms of gender or racial diversity or sexuality, but we need diversity of backgrounds. We need people with liberal arts degrees. We need people with, all kinds of creativity, bringing themselves, tech companies used to be just tech companies maybe in the valley. But as tech pervades every part of our lives, we need people with expertise in those industries that we are disrupting. And so it's everywhere. And I think, what was the question about getting women into those positions? Look, I'm glad that we do things at Vista around the Hour of Code and the internships, and we look at things in our local ecosystem. It's approved, but I really focus less energy on the pipeline problem, because one thing I know about computer science, women who studied in the 80s, there were more women studying computer science than when I went to school. There was a sharp drop off, right? And so you can work on this pipeline problem all you want, but if you are filling a leaky bucket, there's no point. So there's attracting women, there's retaining women, and then there's the most important, progressing women, which I think our panelists did a great job talking about. If we don't have that progression, we know that women drop out of the workforce. And it's the battling every day of not being able to progress or not creating paths for women to progress that create disengagement, right? So that's where I think the energy needs to be spent.
So more specifically, as Approved, what are some of the things that you do to create a more inclusive culture, both to attract women, but also then to retain and progress them?
Yeah, so I think there's two components of this. There's one, you have to decide, and Robert kind of addressed this, you have to decide it's a business imperative. So we have ambitious goals at Approved. And for us to achieve those ambitious goals, talent is key. And what that means in a practical, like taking that down to just pragmatic, what that means is everybody, I believe, will aspire to this, that every single person that we offer a job to should accept it and should thrive. That's Approved. And if that is critical to achieving ambitious goals. So one, you have to decide it's a business imperative. Robert also talked about the fact, and Accenture has actually done studies on this, that inclusive cultures are more innovative. In this world of disrupting industries, we're disrupting the legal industry, which has been doing things the way they've been doing for decades, in an extremely inefficient way. Apologies to any lawyers in the room. But when you're disrupting an industry, innovation is key. And we know that psychological safety is what creates innovative cultures, right? And part of creating an inclusive culture is creating that psychological safety. So you have to decide, okay, this is a business imperative. This isn't about, for me, changing society. I run a business, I have goals. This is a business imperative. So that's one. Then the second part is, what do you do about that? You have to educate yourself. You have to take it all upon, you have to decide for every employee that they all decide to educate themselves. First of all, you have to understand unconscious bias. There is bias in the world. We look at people and stereotype what we think they should be. And we're all wired to it. So knowing that it exists is really important. It helps you to recognize your privilege, right? I have privilege that I have to recognize and check all of the time. And we all need to do it. Because that act of doing that allows, I think Lisa talked about getting interrupted all the time. If you're not talking about the fact that women do get interrupted, I mean, there's data that says that women get interrupted, I don't even remember the numbers, but astronomically more times than men do. There's also data that men in board meetings say that women speak too much. And they've met in those same board meetings, they have measured the word count and the minutes that women speak versus men. And it's not true. So if we don't absolutely educate ourselves about this fact that our brains are wired, we, men, women, everyone is wired a certain way, there's no way to deal with it.
You guys can all see that Monica is a founder and she has a lot of passion for this. So Monica, what are your thoughts on how we can enable more women to actually found companies? There's a lot of data out there about how it is more difficult for women founders to raise capital. Any
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it starts at all levels. Thank goodness that Vista is investing in women to manage money and to make those investment decisions. I'm ashamed to say, when I heard Amy say that she had a 50% women executive team, I feel awful. I mean, that's great for you. I wish that it was true for me now. I wish it had always been true. I just joined the Vista portfolio less than 2 years ago. And before that time, I'm ashamed to say, but I never had a female board member. I had an all-white male board for all of the years of my company and a mostly all-white male executive team for most of the entire time. I think because I had grown up in a very male-dominated and I'd cultivated mentors that were male, I got very comfortable with that. And but I have to say, my Vista board now is predominantly female. And they are kick-ass, awesome to work with. And it is so great. I love that this is the situation now. And I noticed that there is dialogue, and not that the old board members didn't add value or that it wasn't great, but there's dialogue that I have with this team that I would never have had before with my other board. So I think getting women founders is getting women at every level in every role creates that, because if there are women allocating capital, well, then there are going to be more women founders. But it's going to take a while, unfortunately.
So since you joined the Vista portfolio, you have attended, we do a women's event every year that I sponsor with all the women CEOs and a bunch of their directs. We do an offsite. It's a fabulous event. And so you've really had a chance to now network with 45, 50 other very senior women, including Amy and Lisa and Sejal. How important has that been for you in your leadership development?
Again, until last year when I first went to Miraval, I had no idea what I was missing that whole time. I can't believe I've gone my whole life without having something like that. And then it was so life-changing. Because, listening to, Lisa wasn't there last year when I went, but Sejal and Amy were there, and listening to the other women talk about struggling, sometimes it can feel very lonely that maybe you're the only one dealing with the problems that you're dealing with. And I think actually, there is these stories that we tell ourselves at night. When I have a bad day, I don't know, maybe I have a disease, but I go home at night and I think about the stories of how I could have handled it better. And I kick myself for all evening about how I didn't handle that, And I think listening to the other women, that they're dealing with some of the same struggles and that it's not just rosy every day and they just get up and do it again, kind of gives you the power to be brave and to know that you're not alone. And every now I have this thing where I wake up in the morning and I go, all right, I'm not Beyonce. So, okay, but yet. But that's okay. I can still get up today and I can still do everything that I need to do because, yeah. And that, I think that camaraderie and then the ability to reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling or I've got a problem. how have you handled that? That's invaluable.
So shifting gears a little bit, I think you have a very special company, as Zapproved. You were recently named one of Oregon's best places to work, number 18 to be specific. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think one thing that stands out about Zapproved is the fact that you really encourage people to be their whole selves. So your C-suite bios on your website, for those of you guys who haven't seen it, includes hobbies, includes family photos of these executives. I mean, how important do you think that is as a sort of culture setting tone? And do you think that that is more important to women or men? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this culture conversation is critically important because I don't think I can own culture. I try to think of myself as the product manager of our culture. Like, that is my product. And I have to work on it just like any product manager has to work on their product. I don't believe in the term work-life balance, and I probably never have. And again, I'm a mother, I have 2 kids. I've just believed that, like, my life is my life, and that work has been an incredible source of joy for me and my personal development. And I'm proud of all that I've learned and who I've become because of my work. So it's a big part of my life. And there are different times where I have to balance whatever's going on. I've known that that's been true for me. And I think it's just kind of created that people who view it that way kind of, people are attracted to each other that kind of have the same passion. There are times where I don't comb my daughter's hair in the morning when I'm not present, or I'm, and you talked about not feeling guilty. There are times where I'm all in at work, literally 20 hours a day. I mean, you don't start something from nothing and not have those kinds of times in your life. But then there are times where I know my family needs me more, and just role modeling that's kind of the ebb and flow of that is kind of okay, and absolutely we all need to support each other in that.
All right, so another question around sort of career navigation. So I think we all as women have more sort of career opportunities and choices than ever before. So, what advice would you give the younger women in the room who are earlier in their careers?
Yeah. There's this quote. If I had anything to change, I try not to look back and think about things I would do differently because I don't know how useful that is. But if I had anything to tell my younger self or to tell a younger person, it would be that if you decide, there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote about living in the arena. I don't know how many people have heard of it. But if you decide to live in the arena and you decide to take risks, and that's a choice. You have to also, like, why is that hard for people and why do they hold back? It's because you will fail. You will. If you decide, if you're setting yourself up to never ever fail, and it's not that you might fail, it's that you will fail. And if you're setting yourself up to not fail, frankly, I don't think you're challenging yourself enough. And so I think if you can shift the mental model of, like, I will fail, and how will I recover from that? And what will I choose to see that when it happens? Then you can live your life to your fullest. Because, by the way, there are lots of people in the cheap seats, not in the arena, who are willing to criticize you at every turn when you fail and create shame for you and create embarrassment for you. And you have to decide that those are not, like, feedback is a gift, and I absolutely listen to a lot of people that I respect all of the time, and it shapes who I am. But you cannot listen to the critics in the cheap seats. I listen to the people who are also living their life in the arena and who are also, like, absolutely taking, challenging themselves at every turn. So I think that's what I would say. And I think that's harder for women than it is for men, because I think we do condition this perfection into women. And we don't condition bravery into women as much as we do as a society. So I think there's an intentionality and a thoughtfulness about being brave.
So you have already had a tremendous amount of career success. I mean, you had successful careers in big companies, you founded a company, you sold it to Vista. Theoretically, you might not have to work anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that gives you the motivation every morning to like come to work with that passion and take on those challenges and not be afraid to fail and just go after it every single day?
Yeah, I am fortunate that I've got a lot of flexibility and freedom in my life. And I think there's this kind of archetype or stereotype about entrepreneurs that they are rogue, antisocial people who kind of want to create want to create their own flexibility and freedom. And there is some of that in me. But I think in looking back, like if you are successful as an entrepreneur, the reward is that you end up with all kinds of stakeholders and communities that depend on you, right? I have a whole set of employees that are depending on me to be successful. I have an investor base that is depending on LPs that they have that are depending on me to be successful for their retirement. I have a community in Portland where our company is located that is depending on me. I have customers whose very career depends on how we execute. And to be honest, what I think the joy in my life has been belonging to that something that is bigger than me. Like when you belong to something that's bigger than yourself, and when you submit to that and say, hey, all of our fates are tied together in a way that, we can't extract or separate, I think that's where like deep joy and belonging and where you thrive. For me, it's been a source of deep joy. So.
Okay, that was an amazing answer. So I kind of have to end with that. So if you guys can, let me see how much time we have. We have a few more minutes. So I think we have a few minutes for questions. Before we take questions from the audience, I actually have lightning round questions for you. Oh. So you talked about your morning routine, so you took that one away.
Did I?
What is your sort of favorite self-care indulgence?
I'm kind of a binge Netflix watcher in my comfy sweats with snacks. I can binge watch The Crown or Downton Abbey for hours.
And even though you're not Beyonce, I have heard that you love karaoke. So do you have a go-to song?
I do love karaoke. I think cutting loose is also part of a self-care routine. It's one of the ways I like to cut loose, especially with my team. But I like Cyndi Lauper, True Colors.
I'm not going to make you sing it.
No, not here.
All right. Questions from the audience?
Can we start with one from Facebook Live?
Sure.
What is your advice for women who want to break into tech without a formal background in CS?
I think more and more our company doesn't require a formal background, and I think that's becoming more and more the case. So first of all, assume that you can. I think there are all kinds of ways to contribute to tech. A lot of times, if you don't have a formal education, people come up through customer support or customer success, and that's a very powerful way to come into a company because you actually come in, really knowing the customer and understanding something that people who come from computer science degrees to developer positions never ever get, and you forever have like a superpower that other developers don't have. So those kind of other positions and then moving once you're in the company. I think Lisa talked about kind of taking a junior level job and then moving from there.
All right, audience, here we go. How about in the front?
Hi, thank you for this. So what does it take to build a successful company? When you wake up in the morning on Monday morning and you have the week ahead of you, What do you know that you have to do to make sure that happens this week to create more value for your shareholders and your stakeholders?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for saying successful company. I have to remind myself sometimes of that because it doesn't always feel that way because we're setting ourselves up for ambitious goals and there are challenges along the way. I think, people talk about kind of their transitions into work and out of work, and maybe people listen to music. I don't. I get up every morning and I think about, okay, from Amy said, outcomes driven, from a results orientation, what needs to happen for the company and what can I do to make the team, to enable the team to achieve that. And that's just a constant. That's a treadmill that never, ever ends. You just constantly have to think, what can I do today to move the needle? And no, it doesn't feel successful every day. But you have to get over that and go, okay, for if one day out of every 10 feels successful, I like that. The high of the success is worth it.
In the front, we have one. Yeah.
Hi. Also, just want to thank you for sharing your perspective. It's been highly inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things you mentioned was businesses need to understand that diversity and inclusion is a business imperative.
Yeah.
And I think women and other underrepresented minority groups get it. How do you spread that message throughout an organization? And have there been successful strategies when sometimes you have to convince other people that that's the case?
Yeah, that's been something that we've been very intentional about. I think that takes a lot. Look, diversity is one thing, but inclusion is the really hard part. And that takes a lot of intentionality and commitment and repetitive learnings. So to learn about privilege, right? What is the privilege that I have, that you have, that and making sure that everyone knows it and that it doesn't make you bad. It doesn't mean you didn't work hard. It's not about that you had privilege. It's that what do you gain? So making sure everybody understands that and make sure that everybody understands kind of how to handle that privilege, how to be an ally. We have an ally skills workshop that we offer to all the employees, where once you kind of realize your privilege and you realize the ways in which you experience bias, what can you do as an ally? And we reward that ally behavior when we see it happening. So it's part of our value system. And every Monday we have we're a smaller company than their company. So every Monday we have an all hands lunch and we do recognition. Part of the recognition is recognizing when someone was an ally and kind of rewarding that and calling it out in front of everybody and citing that value. We try to tie the recognition to the values that we have. And so we absolutely reward that behavior, celebrate that behavior.
Thank you. Hi, thank you very much. And I went through the same journey of having male mentors and not being with female and shifting, as I evolved. And because I found that when I was younger, women were worse than men. Women in power were not very helpful. And I think it has to be said because we're all talking about, the nice, fuzzy feeling. But I don't know if others experience that. And I was just wondering, is it an evolution in culture? Because obviously I'm French, from New Jersey. And I moved to the US. Is it that? Is it the age? As you age, there is less competition? Or is it like I dealt with a second wave of feminists that were very hard, and is it evolving? So I know it's a complex question, but I think this is very important for women as a supportive group. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I probably could talk way too long, so you're going to have to check me on time here. I think the reason that we have experienced that women aren't as supportive, that is because we lived in a world, and I don't think we live in that world currently, but we lived in a world where there was one spot for a woman. And we were conditioned to believe, if there's a woman, then it must not be sexist. There must not be misogyny there because there's a woman there. And we were conditioned that there was one spot for a minority, one spot for a woman. And women were threatened by the fact that when another woman came, are you taking my one spot? Am I not the one woman? That's a ridiculous thing for us to accept in life, and I think we've started to not accept that. I see evidence that women are absolutely starting to say, no. Tokenism, by the way, that tokenism serves a purpose to create the perception of justice when there isn't justice, or the perception of fairness when there isn't. One Black person, one Latinx person. That actually helps just perpetuate the problems that we have. And so I think women, minorities of every kind are starting to say, hey, no more of that. So I think that's the big shift that we're seeing. And we all need to remind ourselves, and when you get that in your head, that, is there only one spot? You just have to reject it and fight against it. And I'm sure there are cultural differences, but I apologize, I had never lived in Europe, and I'm not probably the best person to talk about it.
Can I just say that I thought that insight of yours was right on, right spot on, about one spot for one woman, and I think it was propagated by men reinforced that to women.
Absolutely.
And so the women felt like they had to react that way. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was really insightful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. I had a question that's also applicable to you, and I wanted to ask the panel before. As a woman who is a successful founder and CEO, many of us look at that as the goal. What does professional and personal development look like at your level? And how do your strategies for progression differ, if at all, from the ones you implemented over the course of your career?
Oh, I've had to, thank you. It's a constant learning. Actually, at the last Miraval session, I spent time with Teresa and Amy and Sejal and a couple others just talking about, they lead much larger organizations. And leading above 150 people is a completely different skill set than leading when everyone knows you and everyone trusts you and you can make one-on-one contact with everyone, which is where I have been leading. So that transition is what I'm going through now. And they talked about how they get up and talk about change management and how they talk to their employees about, the change curve and what you experience, and learning kind of the ways to lead at that level from that group of women. That's been invaluable. And thank you to Betty, because Betty makes this Miraval event happen. So there's constant progression. I think there's, it's just so much to learn and so much to improve on. I'm not Beyonce yet, so I have to work on it.
Hi, I'm Laura Sekar, and I'm a Columbia
Oh,
Business...
wait, can you speak a little louder?
Okay. I'm Laura Sekar. I'm a Columbia Business School graduate and also started one of the largest women-owned venture funds in the U.S.
All right. Rock on, lady.
I have really enjoyed your comments and been so articulate. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you have your company, your team, feel comfortable with taking risks to have, when there's failure, experimenting. How do you get people comfortable with failing and experimentation?
Yeah, actually, it's similar when we do our Monday all hands and we do our recognition and rewards, we call out people who failed. Like, we call it out and we go, hey, this deal didn't happen, but what an amazing learning experience that was for us as an organization. How did we get better as an organization because of what these people did? So we have a gong, and when we close a big deal, the salesperson gets to stand up and talk about the deal and talk about all the war stories to get the deal, and then they hit this big ancient Chinese gong, and it's like a little ceremony. Well, we also have kind of the anti-gong. They don't gong. But they get up and they talk about what they did, what they learned, and we talk about the failure, and then we celebrate them. And I think it's again that intentional mindset that if you're going to try something ambitious, you will fail. So just prepare yourself and decide that that's going to happen, and decide how you're going to deal with it. And actually, if you can even celebrate it, that's even better.
So how did you decide to start doing that? Did you see that somewhere else? Did you invent that? That's brilliant.
I know that other innovative cultures have done it, but to be honest, there was just one day there was a sales engineer and an account executive that worked really hard on we had a big pharmaceutical company that that uses one of our products, and we've been trying to expand the product line in these large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, and these are just long journeys that take a lot of work to earn the trust of a Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company. It takes a lot of work, and I watched these two fairly early career young people work hard for months, and I believe do everything right. Watching them do everything right, and even though they did everything right, this company got acquired by another pharmaceutical company, and then the deal died. And the heartbreak I felt for them made me. That was the first one where I was like, "Get up! This is not a gong, but we're going to like celebrate this." And I think that I did it first, but then I didn't have to do it the second time. I did it the first time, but then other people started doing it and started saying, "Hey, I want to talk about this person who did something that failed."
I love that. Yeah. All right. Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up? I think we have time for maybe one or two more. In the front, we have one and one in the middle as well.
Thank you. That was insightful. It's just a quick question around societies where there's multiple oppressions and the left behind communities or groups transcend women. Advancing women only can inspire a backlash. So how do women women leaders in technology use technology to reduce the poverty gap and equality gap?
That's a great point. Thank you for making it. In the sciences, there's this concept of intersectionality, and I think that we know that suffragettes excluded Black women and their rights to vote, right? We know that in the past, when those kinds of things happen, it does not advance. Like, if there is patriarchy, if there is racism, like there isn't, you have to fight it at all turns. And so that's why it's really important to be inclusive and intersectional in how we fight oppression and prejudice in our society. I think I probably could talk for a long, long time on this topic, but I'll leave it there and just say that I think, if we're not fighting for the trans Black, single mother, if we're not working on that, then, we're doing ourselves a major disservice.
I think there's one more over here, and then I think we probably need to wrap up.
I'll just tag on to that, and it kind of aligns with your work and then also your involvements in the community. Perhaps how you measure impact, whether you have a specific strategy to determining, the time I invested, did I get what back and what results in it, in what form am I looking for that result?
Yeah, this is a very, very hard one. Yeah. And this is why kind of business is fun. I love business because I love the gong, because when we hit the gong, we know there's revenue and we know we can count it, and it's like right there on our P&L. And we look at it and it feels good and you get that quick endorphin hit. This inclusivity work, social justice work, like this is long, hard work where the measurable impact is very hard to see. But I absolutely have had these events in my life where people come to me and say, that you've had some impact on just that one person, and that they've changed their lives. Like when we did our transaction with Vista Equity Partners, we had a lot of early employees, that came and told me stories about selling, paying off all their student debt, buying their first house, and it was incredible just having them talk about how they now had this new vision of what they themselves could do in their lives. So I think you just have to hang on to the little stories and know that, not be patient, but know that some of these things are going to take time and that we just have to keep fighting the good fight, not get discouraged.
Another amazing answer. Great way to end. Thank you so much, Monica, for taking the
Thank you,
time.
Betty.
Thank you guys all for participating.